So let's look at now as first topic of the crime and punishment through time, circa 1000 to the present day. And the first bit is what was it like in medieval England, and in particular Anglo-Saxon England from around the 1000 AD as the book starts. So first thing we need to understand is that England's a very different place back then. For example, England had a population of around 1.7 to 2 million people. And these people mostly, the vast majority, around 90% of them, lived over in the countryside, with some in towns, which were starting to have a growing importance, such as Hamwick, or Southampton nowadays, London, and I'm not going to try and pronounce the name for York. But and another feature of how England was a very different place was the role of the king and the structure of society, because there was no parliament back then. So England was under something called the feudal system. And if I lay that down, then so the first thing, the feudal system, is the king or the crown. I don't have anything to colour in, but to start, the crown, and he rules over a few. He's at the top, and rules over a few nobles. So the barons, they get land. It might be 5 or 6 kilos, but even more though. But there's a vast majority more than the king. There's only one king. And then they have to make sure that the king's peace is being upheld. The law is being upheld among the local communities. If you go to step below that, we get the freemen, who have only a small bit of land, and they have no say in making the law. They don't meet with the king. They very rarely, if ever, meet with the nobles, unless it is to pay taxes or something like that. And below that, you've got the majority of people, the peasants, the serfs, where they're all working for others. So they might work for the freemen or to nobles. Some of them will even work directly for the king, but most of them won't be doing much at all. And because everyone was in such close-knit communities, they were expected to have collective responsibility, which means that if someone in your community committed a crime, then you and the rest of your little hamlet or village were expected to work together to bring that criminal to justice. But unlike the towns, where it's a lot more difficult. So there are a few laws which are common. So there's still things which are completely illegal. So you still can't just go and take someone else's goods or burn your lord's house. Where the kings formally issued codes of law, and basically each king could change whatever they like about it, because there was no step down, but just needed to watch out if there were popular risings which weren't common, especially under kings such as Ethelred. Then, if you look at law enforcement, then, so there are 3 key things here: the role of the local communities, I've already said, and the role of the church, and the importance of God as the final judge, in a sense. God's clear outcome is the outcome that we accepted. And then there's also the difference in the status and position of different groups. So if we go back, the nobles will be treated differently to the freemen and to the serfs. So there is a clear difference between all of them. And so England was split up into different shires. As you can see the remnants of them today, like Hampshire. And one key thing of this was that they would keep splitting up local more local. So there was a King Shire Reeve who was responsible for each shire, but the Shire Reeve becomes the word sheriff in a more modern sense, and then the shires were split up into hundreds, and then each hundred into 10 tithings, and basically everyone in a tithing was responsible for all the others, and they had to protect themselves from crime because there was no professional police force or anything like that. So one key thing was that if one of them spotted a crime, then they had to raise something called the hue and cry, which meant they had to be shouting for help. So if you saw someone go and steal your cow, if it is a very poorly drawn cow. So if someone takes your cow, then you got to go, help, help, and everyone was required for you to try and chase and capture the suspects. But what happens if they were captured then? Let's see what happens next. So, as I said earlier, that the importance of religion cannot be understated, and most petty criminals, or people who weren't directly caught in the act, would have to take an oath declaring their innocence. So, I swear before God that I did not steal this. And even though it obviously didn't mean that they were then punished afterwards, but if there was to try and again do a crime, then it's very difficult to escape from such a tight-knit community when everyone relies on everyone else. It's not as if you can just skip town easily. Of course, there's other times as well, other rights. You had the trial by ordeal, where again you use God to see whether they're guilty or not. So there were different ways of doing it. So there was a trial by hot water or / hot iron. So if you have this hot iron, so it's really hot, then you take someone's hand, and it burns. But then what you do is you cover it up in bandages. Let's just shade it in yellow. So they cut under it, or however, obviously there's not modern bandages in the sense. But then if you cover up a hand with wool or whatever, and we remove the bandages, and the hand's clean, there's nothing wrong with it now, then God was judging the person innocent. But if there was still a mark there, then that's guilt confirmed by God. And that meant that people would be then facing punishment. Even though to a modern person it might seem as if that's a punishment in itself. But then there were more things about it. So there had to be different punishments based on different ideas. So one key punishment was the Weregild, or the man price. So basically, if you murdered someone, then you had to pay a fine to the family based off their status. So if you had a prince, you'd have to pay up to 1,500 shillings, which is a vast majority of poorer people could not afford at all, and was there to act as a deterrent. While if you were just a random serf, then it might only be 40 shillings or so. When some crimes were punished with other methods as well. So there were maiming, where you just cut off a part of the body, as in an ear or a hand. There's the stereotypical stocks and pillory. So if you take that, then you have to put your hands through. Then for things such as crimes against the person. If you had crimes against property, for example, arson was treated as a very extreme crime, because in the sense that you especially as a serf, wouldn't own much land, and then you would therefore be damaging people above you, which means that if you try and betray your lord or treason him, then you're quite likely just to end up swinging away on a rope, and you won't be having a great time. But overall, there are three main categories of crime. So you've got the crime against authority, which would almost always end up in a hanging because of the social system, class system, and the feudal system. But the important thing to note is that murder, in a sense, is paid off by the Vergild fine instead.